In late 2022, a man walked out of an office in Vienna carrying a standard-looking black laptop. It wasn't standard. It was a SINA workstation, a piece of advanced cryptographic hardware used by NATO and the European Union to secure their deepest secrets. That laptop was allegedly headed straight to Moscow. This wasn't a random theft. It was the climax of the most devastating intelligence failure in modern European history. A scandal that didn't just expose Austria as a city of spies, but revealed how a fugitive billionaire and a rogue intelligence officer dismantled a nation's security apparatus from the inside out.
Vienna. For generations, the name has conjured images of imperial grandeur, classical music, and, in the shadows, a labyrinthine world of espionage. From the Cold War's Great Game to the shadowy chases of Harry Lime, Vienna has always been Europe's undisputed city of spies. But this reputation, once a romanticized backdrop for fiction, has, in the 21st century, morphed into a far more sinister reality. This is the story of the Ott Affair, one of the most significant and damaging espionage scandals in modern European history. It is a case that transcends a simple tale of a rogue agent, revealing itself as a sophisticated influence and espionage network that investigators allege had Russian backing. This operation successfully fused political infiltration, transnational organized crime, and high-level human intelligence penetration to achieve a singular, devastating strategic objective: the crippling of an EU member state's domestic intelligence service. For years, a network allegedly acting on behalf of Russian intelligence and through the fugitive Wirecard executive, Jan Marsalek, systematically co-opted high-level officials within Austria's Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution and Counterterrorism, known as the BVT. This network, centered on its head of intelligence operations, Martin Weiss, and his subordinate, Egisto Ott, became a direct pipeline to Moscow. They exfiltrated, investigators allege, vast quantities of sensitive data, including the entire contents of smartphones belonging to Austria's highest-ranking security officials. But the most catastrophic alleged theft was a SINA secure communication laptop. This gave Russian intelligence access to high-grade NATO-linked encryption hardware, prompting fears they could study it for vulnerabilities. The operation climaxed in the 2018 raid on the BVT, a politically driven operation that, investigators believe, may have been indirectly steered or exploited by networks tied to Marsalek. Political allies in the Austrian government were manipulated into decapitating their own agency, reportedly exposing intelligence shared by allies. This event led directly to the BVT's international isolation, its subsequent paralysis, a breakdown that Austria's own inquiry would later cite as a contributing factor in the 2020 Vienna terror attack, and its ultimate dissolution. The Ott Affair is not just an Austrian scandal. It is a profound, long-term crisis of confidence between Austria and its Western partners, demonstrating a catastrophic failure of European internal security that continues to resonate today.
The Ott Affair was not an anomaly. It was the inevitable malignant fruit of a uniquely permissive environment that has made Vienna the city of spies not by accident, but by design. This status is rooted in a unique convergence of history, international diplomacy, and, most critically, a deliberate legal framework that actively facilitates foreign espionage. It creates a vacuum of accountability, a fertile ground where hostile networks can flourish. Historically, Vienna's geographical position as the last major capital before the Iron Curtain cemented its role as a Cold War chessboard. It was a fluid, open city where East met West, a gateway and a crossroads for agents, defectors, and diplomats from both sides. This legacy has not faded. It has been sustained and amplified by Austria's modern status as a host to an exceptionally high concentration of international organizations, from the United Nations, UN, to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, and even OPEC. Vienna is a global diplomatic hub. This concentration provides unparalleled cover for foreign intelligence officers. Countries are permitted to send multiple diplomatic missions, one directly to Austria, and additional missions accredited to the various international bodies. Critically, all these missions provide diplomatic immunity. This has led to estimates that literally thousands of foreign agents are active in the city, with a disproportionately large percentage of them operating under Russian diplomatic cover. For hostile intelligence services, Vienna is not just a city, it is a meticulously crafted operational safe zone. The single greatest enabler of this pervasive espionage, and the fundamental flaw that allowed the Ott Affair to fester for so long, is Austria's unique legal framework. Rooted in its 1955 Declaration of Neutrality, Austrian law is famously and dangerously lax on espionage. Austria's laws historically made it difficult to prosecute foreign agents unless they spied on Austria itself. This created a loophole that allies say made Vienna a magnet for espionage. A Russian, Chinese, or any other agent could operate from Austrian soil, targeting other EU member states, NATO officials, international organizations, journalists, or dissidents, and, as long as they did not spy on Austria itself, they were notoriously difficult to prosecute. This policy is not an oversight, it is a deliberate element of an economic and diplomatic model that monetizes Vienna's status. Austria effectively positions itself as a Geneva of espionage, attracting international bodies by offering a stable, neutral environment, even if that neutrality means turning a blind eye to widespread illicit activity against its allies. This legal void is compounded by a deep-rooted political and cultural willingness within Austria to maintain cozy ties with Russia, particularly in critical sectors like energy and finance. This convergence of legal permissiveness and political complacency has led international partners to view Austria not as a neutral state, but as a compromised state, and, in the stark assessment of some Western officials, Russia's tunnel into the heart of Europe. It was this top-down cultural and legal permissiveness which actively deprioritizes serious counterintelligence against Russian services that created the fertile soil in which the Ott Marsalek network could grow, protected from serious internal scrutiny for years. The penetration of Austria's domestic intelligence service, the BVT, was not a simple case of a lone mole. It was, investigators allege, a sophisticated structured intelligence cell, allegedly managed by a non-state actor on behalf of Russian security services. This network was characterized by a top-down co-optation of the agency's leadership, bypassing typical recruitment to ensure maximum access and deniability. The central figure in this web of deceit was Jan Marsalek, the fugitive Austrian chief operating officer, COO, of the now infamous German payments company Wirecard. Marsalek was not just a corporate criminal, responsible for one of Germany's largest financial scandals, a €1.9 billion fraud. He was also, according to intelligence reports, a long-term, high-level Russian intelligence asset, reportedly recruited by at least 2010, if not earlier. Described by investigators as the spider in the web, Marsalek functioned as a de facto franchise manager for Russian intelligence, primarily the FSB, the Federal Security Service, and the GRU, the main intelligence directorate. He brilliantly used his corporate status as cover and Wirecard's illicit funds to finance and manage multiple Russian operations across Europe, including the Austrian cell and a Bulgarian spy ring in the UK. This model provided Russia with plausible deniability, a self-funding operational budget, and deep penetration into Western financial systems. Marsalek, the alleged mastermind, is now believed to be living in Russia under FSB protection, using the alias Alexander Neladov. He was the coordinator, the paymaster, and the bridge between Moscow's tasking and the BVT's internal capabilities. The true linchpin of the BVT's compromise was not Egisto Ott, but his superior, Martin Weiss. Weiss was the former head of BVT's Department 2, the agency's most critical directorate, responsible for intelligence gathering and investigations. In this role, Weiss had direct, unfettered access to all classified information collected by the BVT, as well as highly sensitive intelligence shared by allied partners. Weiss's career path reveals the depth of the penetration. He didn't just leak information, he actively integrated with the hostile network. Weiss ultimately left the BVT to go work directly for Jan Marsalek, becoming the explicit bridge between Russian tasking, via Marsalek, and the BVT's internal capabilities. Weiss, who had a close friendship with Ott, admitted to taking requests for sensitive data and illegal background checks directly from Marsalek, and then passing them to Ott to execute. This confirms that the BVT's penetration was top-down. The agency's intelligence gathering directorate was actively, deliberately, and strategically co-opted. Weiss, who also played a crucial role in orchestrating Marsalek's escape from Austria after the Wirecard collapse, currently resides in Dubai, beyond the reach of Austrian justice. He was not just a source, he became in effect a conduit of betrayal within Austria's intelligence hierarchy, transforming a nation's intelligence service into a tool for its adversaries. If Marsalek was the spider and Weiss the architect, then Egisto Ott was the network's primary worker bee, the insider who executed the tasking and acquired the critical data. A former police officer and longtime BVT intelligence agent who managed undercover agents, Ott had been under suspicion for years. In early 2017, Austrian officials received explicit warnings from the CIA that Ott was suspected of selling information to Russia. Despite these warnings, Ott was merely suspended in late 2017. Critically, he was not fired. Instead, he was reassigned to a police academy. This administrative blunder proved catastrophic. From his new, seemingly innocuous post, Ott maintained his access to police databases and, crucially, his network of contacts within the Austrian security apparatus. He relentlessly leveraged this access to conduct hundreds of illegal queries for Marsalek and Weiss, running background checks and extracting personal data on a vast number of targets. Ott was the hands-on operative, leveraging his insider status to systematically acquire the data, bypass security protocols, and fulfill the network's tasking, turning Austria's own systems against itself.
The quantity and strategic value of the data exfiltrated by the Marsalek-Ott network, as alleged in investigative warrants, represent one of the most comprehensive intelligence failures in modern European history. This was not a smash-and-grab data theft. It was a systematic, multi-year mining operation that targeted the very brains of Austria's internal security apparatus. In 2017, the network was presented with a golden opportunity. 3 of Austria's highest-ranking Interior Ministry officials, the men who effectively ran the nation's entire domestic security and police apparatus, were involved in a boat accident where they damaged their official high-security smartphones. The phones were handed over to a BVT technician for data recovery. That technician, allegedly operating as part of the Ott network, didn't just recover the data, he cloned the entire contents of all 3 phones and passed the copies to Egisto Ott. The targets of this digital theft were not mid-level bureaucrats. They were the absolute leadership of Austria's internal security. Michael Kleib Müller, the long-time and immensely powerful head of the Interior Ministry's cabinet, the top political official managing the entire ministry. Michael Takats, the federal police director, the top operational commander of Austria's police forces, and Gernot Meyer, the director of the Federal Office for Immigration and Asylum, the official holding all of the nation's most sensitive immigration and asylum data. This data, the complete contact lists, private calendars, and confidential correspondence of these three men was then, according to investigative files, physically smuggled via Istanbul to Moscow by Jan Marsalek's network and delivered directly to the FSB. In a single stroke, Russian intelligence had acquired a complete order of battle for Austria's internal security apparatus. They possessed a rich source of compromat for potential blackmail, a detailed map of the leadership's networks, and a direct key to the state's sensitive asylum and immigration data, a priceless asset for tracking dissidents and agents. The single most alarming physical asset allegedly stolen by the Ott network, however, was a SINA laptop. This compromise goes far beyond Austria, threatening the communications security of Germany, the European Union, and NATO itself. SINA, which stands for Secure Internetwork Architecture, is not a simple software program. It is a high-security, holistic system developed in Germany by the firm secunet and approved by the German Federal Office for Information Security, or BSI. It is an architecture of hardware-based cryptography and a proprietary, toughened SINA operating system. It is the backbone of secure communication for the entire German federal government and is widely used by NATO and other EU security networks to process, store, and transmit classified information, with components approved for classifications up to German national secret. The theft of this device is a case study in the network's audacity. In November 2022, critically, after Ott had been suspended, and after the BVT itself had been formally dissolved, the network was, allegedly, still fully operational. At the behest of Jan Marsalek, Egisto Ott acquired an encrypted SINA workstation laptop. He was paid €20,000 for the device, which he handed to an accomplice, who then transferred it, investigators allege, directly to a Russian intelligence service. The strategic damage from this theft is not the specific data that may have been on the laptop, which was likely encrypted. The catastrophic loss Western intelligence fears is the physical hardware itself. By acquiring a SINA workstation, the FSB gains a golden key. They can now conduct extensive hardware-level reverse engineering on the device in their own laboratories. This allows them to analyze the hardware-based cryptography chips for unknown flaws or vulnerabilities, dissect the proprietary toughened SINA OS to find zero-day exploits, attempt to extract root encryption keys or firmware, and, most importantly, develop future targeted exploits to compromise the entire SINA network, which is still in use today across Europe. The timing of this theft is also a devastating indictment of Austrian security. It occurred in late 2022, a full year after Ott had been released by an Austrian court on the grounds that he was no longer a persistent threat. This suggests, with chilling clarity, that the hostile network that destroyed the BVT survived its dissolution, and that the Austrian justice system's assessment of the threat was catastrophically naive.
The Ott Marsalek network's alleged activities soon escalated far beyond passive data theft. They transitioned into the realm of active measures, offensive operations designed to physically threaten enemies of the Kremlin and to structurally dismantle Austria's ability to conduct counterintelligence. The network actively targeted individuals deemed enemies of the Russian state. Egisto Ott allegedly used his retained police database access to query the private Vienna home address of Christo Grozev, the lead Russia investigator for the journalism outlet Bellingcat. Grozev, operating from Vienna, had become one of the FSB's most hated targets for his work in exposing Russian intelligence operations, including the poisoning of Alexei Navalny and the 2018 Skripal attack in the UK. Ott supplied Grozev's address to Jan Marsalek. Marsalek, in turn, tasked his Bulgarian spy ring with active measures against the journalist. The plot, according to investigators, included a break-in of Grozev's apartment to steal his laptop and USB sticks, and potentially his murder or kidnapping. The threat was deemed so credible by European security services that Christo Grozev, one of the world's foremost investigators of Russian intelligence, was forced to flee Vienna, stating that he could no longer consider the city safe. In effect, a hostile intelligence service using Austria's own security apparatus had successfully neutralized and evicted a high-profile journalist from an EU capital. In a shocking escalation, Ott's role expanded from a simple data theft to an operational consultant for assassination. The 86-page arrest warrant against him alleges that after a Russian-ordered killing in Germany, the 2019 Tiergarten murder of a Chechen dissident, Ott, at the request of his Russian handlers, analyzed the operation. He wrote up suggestions for improvement. This single detail is profound. It implies a deep level of integration and trust. Egisto Ott was leveraging his decades of Western counterintelligence expertise to provide after-action analysis and advise the FSB on how to refine its wet work or assassination operations to be more effective on European soil. But the network's masterpiece was not a data theft or a kidnapping plot. It was the 2018 raid on the BVT itself. This event, which crippled Austrian intelligence, is now understood by many as the climax of the network's operation, a sophisticated, active measure that weaponized the Austrian state against itself. The political context in 2017 provided the perfect opportunity. Austria's far-right, pro-Russian Freedom Party entered the governing coalition. Its Secretary-General, Herbert Kickl, became Interior Minister, giving him direct political control over the BVT. This created a perfect convergence of interests. 1. The BVT, under its professional director, Peter Gridling, was very worried about the Freedom Party's contacts with Russia and was actively investigating them. 2. Jan Marsalek, a suspect GRU asset, and his BVT insiders, Ott and Weiss, desperately needed the agency neutralized to protect their own espionage operations. The network allegedly provided the pretext. Jan Marsalek, with suspected help from Ott, allegedly fed a false, manufactured dossier to the FPO. This document was filled with bogus allegations of corruption and misconduct within the BVT, aimed squarely at its loyal, professional leadership. Acting on this manufactured pretext, Interior Minister Kickl used the dossier to push the Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office to act. On February 28, 2018, Austrian federal police, acting on the orders of a politically aligned ministry, raided the headquarters of their own domestic intelligence agency and the homes of its senior officials. The raid's true purpose was operational, not legal. It immediately suspended loyal officers like Director Gridling, effectively decapitating the agency. Most critically, the raiders seized vast quantities of highly sensitive data, including, according to reports, a copy of the Neptune database, a hard drive reported containing sensitive intelligence shared with the BVT by allied partner services. This was not just a domestic political dispute. Investigators now allege it was a hostile state capture operation, engineered or at least exploited from the outside. A suspected Russian agent, Marsalek, and his insider, Ott, allegedly created the pretext, which their political ally, the FPO, used to seize control of the state's security apparatus and, in the process, expose Allied intelligence for their foreign masters. Although Austrian courts later declared the raid largely illegal, the damage was irreversible.
The cascading consequences of the BVT's deep penetration culminating in the politically motivated 2018 raid, were not theoretical. They were immediate, catastrophic, and led to the agency's total isolation, its functional paralysis, and its eventual, humiliating dissolution. In the immediate aftermath of the 2018 raid, Austria's allied intelligence partners acted swiftly and decisively. They effectively quarantined the BVT. The agency, now seen as politically hijacked by a pro-Russian party and deeply penetrated by Russian intelligence, was cut off. The BVT was regarded by its partners as being so compromised that for a time it was cut out of much European intelligence sharing activity. This was not a punitive measure, it was a basic act of operational security. Western intelligence services, particularly from the US, UK, and Germany, had been warning Austria about Egisto Ott for at least a year. Their warnings were ignored. The 2018 raid, which reportedly exposed the Neptune database containing Allied secrets, confirmed their worst fears. Sharing further intelligence with Austria was now viewed by many services as tantamount to handing it directly to an FSB courier in Moscow. Austria, a member of the European Union, had become a black hole for Western intelligence. The BVT, now leaderless, demoralized, politically neutered, and blinded by the Allied intelligence freeze-out, was institutionally paralyzed. This internal rot had a direct and tragic result. On November 2, 2020, a known extremist whom the BVT had been aware of carried out a deadly terrorist attack in the streets of Vienna, killing 4 people and injuring 23. The subsequent investigation was scathing. It concluded that the BVT's failure to act on information regarding the attacker was linked to the disruption caused by the 2018 raid. The agency, weakened and disorganized, had failed to perform its most basic function, protecting Austrian citizens. The Russian-linked operation to neutralize the BVT was therefore a direct contributing factor in the deaths of Austrian citizens 2 years later. The combination was insurmountable. The deep-rooted espionage scandals embodied by Ott and Weiss, the political hijacking of the 2018 raid, the total isolation from Allied partners, and the catastrophic public failure to prevent the 2020 terror attack made the BVT's position untenable. The brand was toxic, the institution broken beyond repair. In late 2021, the Austrian government formally dissolved the BVT. The agency that had been systematically targeted, penetrated, and fatally compromised had ceased to exist. In late 2021, the Austrian government attempted to rebuild from the BVT's ashes by creating a new agency, the Directorate of State Security and Intelligence, DSN. This new body was established under new laws with new oversight, with the single explicit primary goal of restoring trust with the Austrian public, and far more critically, trust with its international intelligence partners. Despite the new name and organizational chart, Allied skepticism remains profound. The DSN is in effect on political probation. International partners are not concerned with the DSN's new logo. They are concerned with Austria's political hygiene. The primary threat, the continued influence and potential return to power of the FPO, remains. Furthermore, the 2022 theft of the SINA laptop, a full year after the new DSN was created, suggests that the hostile networks that destroyed the BVT survived its dissolution and remain active, capable, and confident. The Ott Affair serves as a textbook case of 21st century state capture. It provides a stark, unambiguous demonstration of how a Russian-linked network can exploit a nation's vulnerabilities to achieve the strategic crippling of a Western security service for minimal cost. Not through force, but through patient infiltration, political co-option, and the exploitation of a nation's own systemic weaknesses. The operation's success relied on a sophisticated fusion of espionage and influence methods. It exploited Austria's safe harbor espionage laws as an operational base. It bypassed low-level recruitment to co-opt the head of intelligence gathering, Martin Weiss. It franchised the operation's management to a deniable, self-funding corporate criminal, Jan Marsalek, and it aligned with a domestic political party, the FPO, to use the state's own power to achieve the hostile service's goals. Ultimately, Austria's security architecture was not broken by an external force. It collapsed from within, devoured by its own political compromises, its unique legal loopholes, and the hostile agents it willingly tolerated in its city of spies. The challenge for its successor, the DSN, is not one of institutional restructuring. It is whether the Austrian state as a whole has finally found the political will to cure the systemic disease of permissive neutrality that made this catastrophe possible in the first place.